Welcome to The Wave. We are Voices of Ecology, a movement powered by the European Union ERASMUS Plus program. Wave brings youth voices to the forefront, from real-life interviews with youth in the eco-village movement to exploring degrowth and youth perspectives on intergenerational fairness. We're a multi-host podcast where each episode is unique and is hosted by a different Wave participant. With a rotating format, a diversity of voices, perspectives, and passions, Wave brings them all to the mic. Join us as we dive into bold conversations, share inspiring stories, and explore how we can all live more sustainably.
Can we imagine a capitalist system that functions without continuous economic growth? Or does embracing Agrowth require moving towards something fundamentally new?
It's a very interesting question, yeah. And many people argue that we need to move away from capitalism to solve the problem of climate change and other environmental problems or problems of inequality. I'm not easily convinced of that. First of all, because I don't know what is the alternative. If the alternative is communistic planning, then as I said already, we don't have good experience with it. I also think that the term capitalism is a bit problematic because we don't have a purely capitalist system in my view. I mean, there's a lot of safeguards in our system. We have minimum wages, we have labor regulation, labor laws, we have unemployment benefits, we have pensions, we have sick leave. We have even now rights for people who have a child, and even not only the mother but the father has rights in that regard. So there's unions. I could go on. There's much more. There's progressive taxes. So I think we have quite a socialist capitalist system. I like to use the term semi-capitalism. I don't think we have a pure capitalist system. If you would ask Karl Marx, who wrote about Das Kapital, who wrote critically about capitalism in the 19th century, if you would be able to get him in our modern society and let him look around, I don't think he would be so negative about it. He would say, Jesus, but this is the ideal system. I think he would be quite positive about it. Because what he was referring to was quite harsh system with little protection of people. That doesn't mean that I'm saying we have a perfect system. We don't have it. We need, of course, much more environmental regulation. We need a more progressive system, in my view. But it's also difficult to arrange that for some reason. It's very strange that many people with low incomes, they vote for right-wing parties that are not very progressive in their thinking about income taxation and so on. So why is that? I always say there are different ways, different logics to vote politically. So if you are rich, maybe your logic is, have to protect my salary, my income. I'm voting right-wing because then the taxes will be lower. If you have a very low income and you're a member of the union, maybe you say, I vote left-wing because the Socialist Party will protect my interests. Now, what happens with the people who are low income and vote right-wing? There's something missing in the logic there, you would say. But there's a lot of those people everywhere because many people are voting for other reasons, because of immigration maybe, or they don't like the climate policy, or maybe there's other reasons. And so it's very difficult to get support for very progressive policies, even though most people don't have this high salary. We could say, for instance, maximum salary in our society is €1 million. That looks high, but there are people who earn more. So we should be able to say 99.9% don't earn that salary. So it should be easy to get a majority vote for that. No, it's not. It's not. You might say that's because of the American dream. Maybe people think one day I am there. I don't want to live it because maybe if I'm lucky in my life, I will have a salary of more than 1 million. Could be. I don't think that's the full explanation. It cannot be. But what I learned from history is that there is no support for very progressive policies. So we have to be realistic. Maybe this is the best society we can have. Maybe more socialist than this is impossible. You see also that in most countries, when there is a socialist government for 4 years, then everybody's tired, you get a right-wing government again. Generally, in most countries that I am thinking of, right-wing is more dominant than left-wing. And we live also in an era where right-wing is very dominant. Trump is not interested at all in inequality. I mean, Most of the people in his cabinet are billionaires, not even millionaires, they're billionaires. It's a crazy world, the US. But in Europe, you also see in many countries right-wing governments. Spain, where I am, is quite an exception, but Spain has a leftish government, but the left wing doesn't have a majority. There are two right-wing parties, moderate right-wing parties, that need to give support. So Spain is in majority right-wing. And because of the regional differences, disparities, the left wing managed to get more support. And also because the left wing is better in making coalitions and negotiation than the right wing in Spain. But still, Spain is, if you look at the numbers, Spain is a little bit more right wing than left wing. And why is that? Most people in Spain don't have a high income. There's a lot of inequality. Why don't people vote on the basis of that? So there is no logic in politics, And so I am not very optimistic that we can move away from capitalism, because we cannot even do small changes that seem logical from a political perspective. So I'm very pessimistic. And then I also don't think it's necessary, because let's be honest, if we really would move away from capitalism, far away, so no property rights, no profit making, no markets, because those are the three elements for me of capitalism: private property, profits, and markets. That's the essence for me of capitalism. You could take one or two or three of those away. Is that a guarantee for a better world? I don't see it. We cannot expect people to go to a life of self-sufficiency. Everybody grows their fruit and vegetables in their own garden. Many people don't have a garden even. Most people don't know how to do that. It's extremely inefficient also, of course. With the numbers of people we have on the planet, I don't know, do we have already more than 8 billion people? Close to, I think. I mean, it's impossible to move away from formal markets and from mass production. I mean, I can see the disadvantages of that, but I don't think there's a way back now. I just don't see it. So I feel that people who talk about moving away from capitalism, I think they are naive. I think they're not. I understand that it's nice. I like to talk about it with a beer also. I think it's an interesting discussion, but I cannot take it very seriously. Because even if we would move away from capitalism, listen, by 2050, we should be close to a solution for climate change. Otherwise, extreme climate change is going to hit us. And so in 2.5 decades, we can move away from capitalism and get a better system. That's unrealistic. That's totally unrealistic. And now also with the right-wing governments that we have everywhere, it's not going to happen. We only get more privatization, more inequality, more liberalization. It's not going to happen. The European Union, which is a big player, also is not in that direction. In the European Union, the middle and the right wing also dominate. So I don't see the political majority to realize such a scenario. It's very far away. It would require a revolution, but I also don't see a revolution in the air now. But it might be that if we have extreme climate change and if we get food shortages, which I don't see as impossible, I think that in the coming decades that might happen in the world, food shortages, because climate change is going to affect agriculture more than anything else, of course. And a lot of agriculture is already having problems. Imagine, that's the last thing I'll say because I spoke long enough. Spain is known, with a few other countries, as the major producer of olives, olives and olive oil, because the olive tree is the plant that grows very well in a very hot climate. And now, olive trees have a problem. It's getting too hot in Spain. Olive trees don't do well. The production of olives is running into problems because of climate change. That was unimaginable. That a tree like an olive tree could not handle climate change. No, it cannot. It's just indicative for me for climate change. And a lot of other activities are going to be affected also. So if food is going to be a problem, then we'll get conflicts. Water might also be a cause of conflict. And if we have conflicts, then you cannot predict what happens. Then anything might happen. We think we live in a stable world, but we don't. So Trump is an unstable factor. Putin, these are unstable factors. Theocracies like Iran, with all their derived radical movements, or in Israel with Orthodox Jews, which are also radical. They would also like a theocracy. All these are, from a social perspective, very dangerous. But climate change will make it worse. And climate change on top of religious and ethnic diversity is also very problematic. Look what's happening in Africa. All the conflicts that we have now in the world are usually a combination of climate change, scarcity, and religious differences. So that's a mix that is extremely dangerous. And that mix won't go away. It will only get worse, I think. So that's what I'm worried about. And I don't think moving away from capitalism is a solution to that. I can't see that. Just can't see that. No.
Thanks a lot for all those insights. It makes me think about many things, and it raises a lot of questions. But yeah, I'd like to turn now on the political and social dimension of Agrowth. So you started a little to talk about that, but how is the Agrowth movement supporting ambitious environmental and social policy design and adaptation?
I have to say again, first of all, it's not a movement. It's a very simple idea in a way. It's not an ideology. Degrowth is a movement, is an ideology. And there's also diversity of opinions, because in the degrowth movement, you have people who want moderate changes, you have people who are very radically against capitalism, and they want a completely different society. So degrowth is not monolithic. It's very diverse. Agrowth is not an ideology. You could say, you could take out the ideo. It's not ideological, it is logical. It's that simple. Why? Because I am in favor of ignoring the GDP and hence growth, economic growth. And if you ignore it, then you don't care about growth. You become indifferent. And it's no more complicated than that. If you become indifferent, then there's not this barrier that we always have to grow. No, you're not interested anymore. And then you can make all kinds of decisions that are good for society and maybe affect GDP negatively, but you don't care anymore. And so it's interesting because many people who were pro-growth have reacted to me by saying, I always thought I was pro-growth. But after now hearing you and reading about Agrowth, I realize I have to be in favor of Agrowth. That's the logical scientific option. I realized completely. And clever people that I respect a lot have said that to me. So that does me good, you know. I want... Yeah, if clever people resist it, then I wouldn't like it. And in the degrowth community, many people have also said to me, yes, I can also embrace Agrowth. I can see that. And some people have even said, yeah, I think Agrowth is a weaker version of degrowth. I wouldn't say it like that, but it's fine if they want to say it like that. I've even heard one very famous person in the community here say, well, if I talk in my community, I talk about degrowth. But if I talk to politicians, I talk more Agrowth style. And I thought it was interesting, you know. So, but it's also interesting that if I discuss with people from degrowth, and they often say that they are not they're not anti-GDP growth. But yeah, it may be true that some people don't think that, but there's a lot of people who are anti-growth and anti-GDP growth, or people who, even if there's an economic crisis, they think it's positive. They think an economic crisis is good. Whereas an economic crisis never is good, because an economic crisis generally hurts the poor more than the rich. So I think it's a bit simplistic to say an economic crisis is good, but that fits an ideology. Ideologies have simplistic ideas. And for instance, another idea that they have is that we should consume less. And that sounds positive and but it's a bit populistic idea, because to say we have to consume less is vague. It's not very scientific. What does it mean, consume less? Does it mean consume less in kilograms, in volume, or in money, or something else? Well, all these things are not relevant. I think we should consume less of high carbon goods. That's more a specific statement. But consuming less in general is too vague for me. That won't guarantee anything. I don't know even what it means. What do you mean with, I'm going to consume less? So what? What do you mean with that? You're going to consume less of everything you consume? So you're going to eat less meat, less potatoes, less socks, less trousers, less bicycle, less... That's nonsense too, of course. It's not going to... So it is vague. If you say less consumption is vague, and still a lot of people use that. We have to consume less. I understand it. I fully understand why it's popular, but it's not scientific. It's not good science. But it's very central to the degrowth idea. We have to consume less. I don't think it's useful to think like that. As a result, also, they have indicators that add all the kilograms of weight of anything we do. But that's also not useful, because 1 kilogram has more environmental impact than another. A kilogram of CO2, or a kilogram of toxics, or a kilogram of plastics, or a kilogram of sand, you cannot compare them, you cannot add them. A kilogram of sand is quite innocent. A kilogram of water too. A kilogram of CO2 is worse. A kilogram of plastics, and well, depends also where these plastics end. So, kilogram of toxic materials is very dangerous. That you cannot compare that's 1,000,000 times worse than CO2. So you have to use weights if you aggregate, if you want to sum those kilograms. And so, but in the degrowth world, they talk about all that as if it's simple. The total weight, the total consumption. No, it cannot convince me. I don't think we find solutions by thinking in those terms. It's populism. And there will always be populism, but in science, we should avoid populism, of course. And that's why I'm critical. And Agrowth doesn't go in that direction at all. It doesn't make these simplistic statements, in my view. But it's not a movement. It's a simple idea. It's so simple that I was surprised that nobody had thought about it. Really, eh? But it's not simple enough for people to not have thought about it. I also understand why people overlooked it.
Yeah,
So
thank you to have raised also this question of consumption. So as we said a bit already, we live in this highly individualistic society where we all seek the pursuit of our individual goals and lifestyles, often to the detriment of our planet or the social fabric. So we are wondering in your opinion, what cultural or narrative shifts are needed for Agrowth to gain broader acceptance? And where can citizens, especially young people, because it's also our audience, push back?
Yeah. Well, how to promote Agrowth, that's for me also still an unresolved issue, because people ask me also sometimes, what is now the disadvantage of Agrowth? And I have to say, it's probably that it's an abstract idea for many people. I mean, I've also heard other people explain it, and they didn't explain it always precisely. So it is difficult for people to settle in their mind. And there's also people who say to me, I don't see the difference with degrowth. Well, I see the difference extremely clear, but it says that it's difficult for people sometimes to handle such abstract concepts. Now, I am the whole day thinking about abstract concepts, so I'm used to that, I guess. But I've also, in the beginning, when I started to use the concept of Agrowth, in the beginning, I got also resistance from people who felt that I was anti-growth. And so I've said, no, it's not anti-growth, it's anti-growth fetishism or growth obsession, the obsession with growth. That doesn't mean that it's against growth under any circumstance. No, if growth can go well with solving important problems and creating equity and creating climate protection, then there's no problem. It's also not necessary to have the growth, but if growth is inevitable outcome, then fine, I have no problem with it. That's something else to say that I want growth. Because I'm an Agrowth proponent, I don't want growth. I don't see the need to strive for growth. I don't think it's a guarantee for solutions. At the same time, I also don't think that being against growth is a guarantee for solutions. So it works both ways, in my view. Focusing so much on being against growth, like the degrowth movement, is for me also focusing on the wrong thing. I want to focus on policies. And so if you ask me also what young people could do or citizens could do, then I would say vote. Voting is the most important thing you can do. There have been studies also now to look at what actions and decisions of people have more influence on CO2 emissions. And people often think things like buying a car, going on holidays with plane. And of course, these things have an impact. But the two things that have more impact than anything else are very different choices. One is voting. Voting can have the most impact. If you are the marginal voter that changes the balance in the majority, and all of us could in principle be that, then you change the whole future. So that's a huge decision. Through voting, you can have much more impact on CO2 emissions in the future than through your own consumption behavior. Interestingly, the environmental movement, and even in my world, many colleagues, they try to push people to change their behavior in consumption. Not me. I think it's not possible. I want to change behavior through the policies, but not through voluntary action. But I cannot change people's political voting choices through any instrument. That is voluntary. In our society, you're voluntary to vote. You will be influenced by your family and friends, of course, but it's a voluntary choice. So there I say to people, please think hard and vote. Go voting always, because that's the main influence you have on your future and the future of your children and the future of any human being. And the other, what's the other important choice that people can make? Having a child. Having a child is the worst you can do for the environment, because having a child means putting a person on the planet for, on average 70 years, 80 years in most Western countries, that person will consume during their life, and the chances even that that person will also reproduce and have a child or more children. And so having children is the biggest contribution of any person on CO2 emissions or on any environmental pressure that you can create. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have children, but I'm just to clarify it. To clarify, number one is voting. Number two is having a decision to have a child. And then come things like a house, a car, and flying. Those are, of course, also three decisions that have a huge impact, but they are below, interestingly. And so voting, that's what people have to think about. And I think Agrowth also connects very well to voting behavior, because if people can vote and also if politicians make decisions, then this removing this constraint of always growth, unconditional growth, will mean we have more room to make good choices as voters and as politicians. So my Agrowth perspective links very well to voting and political behavior, I think. Whereas degrowth, to compare again, degrowth, I think, puts much more emphasis on bottom-up solutions, individuals, corporations, sharing, and it comes more from the voluntary side. There's also other elements there, I'm not saying that, but they stress much more an ideology that people have to change their behavior in their consumption domains, you know? And I would say Agrowth links more to changing behavior in the voting political domain.
Okay, thank you very much. Now to conclude, I'd like to look a bit into the future. So you said earlier, if I understood well, that Agrowth doesn't have a plan like degrowth can have. So I guess, because we had a question about what would a society guided by Agrowth would look like in 20 or 30 years. But I guess the answer is not straightforward.
Well, I can say something about it, because it's a good question also in this context. You know why? Because if you don't have the growth constraint anymore, then society can move in different directions. So it's not, what will happen is that we will have lower growth on average. That's for sure. And so we will be able to make choices that improve equity and sustainability more. So I think an Agrowth society will move quicker to a more equitable and a more sustainable society than a growth society. And also than a degrowth society, because in my view, the degrowth society is not effective through its bottom-up solutions, and also it can create a lot of resistance against getting the political majority support. Whereas an Agrowth approach could get this majority support more easily. So it would depolarize. I think that's also an element that I use a lot in my talks about Agrowth, that since Agrowth is something that can be embraced also by a lot of people who traditionally thought they were pro-growth, and since also many degrowth supporters say, well, Agrowth I can also support, it depolarizes. So it's easier to get a majority around the concept of Agrowth than around these other concepts. And so I think an Agrowth society would more quickly develop into an equitable and sustainable direction than either the pro-growth or the degrowth strategies.
Okay, so do you have hope that such a shift is possible?
Yeah, but I guess I should have to work harder, and making this podcast is the kind of things that can diffuse the idea, because it is true that the idea has so far been mainly in academia. I mean, I've given a lot of lectures about it and I'm getting invited a lot. So it is diffusing slowly. But I have to say, the degrowth movement has worked much more on getting attention. But that's also because degrowth is less scientific and is more settled in NGOs and in societal movements. So it makes sense also, I guess. I don't know, maybe I should work more on creating critical mass around support for Agrowth. But I'm also not an expert, and I'm an academic. So I guess I feel more comfortable in the academic world than outside. But who knows? Yeah.
And finally, I'm going to ask if listeners were to take away one key message from this conversation, what should it be?
Yeah, well, I think what I want to say is that since Agrowth is a very abstract idea, let me say something about what it is and what it isn't. So I would say Agrowth is not being against growth, but being against growth fetishism. And since fetishism is also an abstract word, I have a series of words. I wrote it here down for myself because I never had thought about it. So it was very useful to think about it. So Agrowth is against growth fetishism or growth obsession or growth at all costs or unconditional growth or growth addiction or growth mania or growth dogma or the growth paradigm or growthism or growth dependency or the growth imperative. All these things I'm against. And anybody supporting Agrowth should be against. But it doesn't mean that you cannot accept growth when it's an outcome of good policies, good sustainable and social policies. If we have the good policies and you still have growth, you shouldn't necessarily be against it. But you should be indifferent about it. You shouldn't care. And that's what Agrowth is about.
Thanks a lot. That was very clear. And I'm wondering, I'm adding this question, but do you have some resources that you can share to our listeners or recommend?
Yes. Yeah, I have several articles. I have like 5-6 articles going from less abstract to more abstract, shorter. There is a 1-page summary and a 3-page summary, a 5-page, 10-page, 20-page. Anything is there, you know. And it also, in my writings, I learned. So my first writing about it was very much in response to degrowth. It was a bit a criticism of degrowth and a plea for Agrowth. Still think it's a very good paper, but I have also added elements later. So it has become richer and more subtle, I would say, which is normal if you develop a new concept, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
But people can always contact me. I'm easy to find. Because on the internet there's a lot of information about me. You can probably also find my papers. But if people have problems accessing my articles because some of them may be behind paywalls or something, then or some are in books, which are sometimes also difficult to get, I can share the information. If they send me an email, I will quickly respond and send documents.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your interest. Yeah, it was very nice, this.
Yes, it was really nice. As we come to the end of our podcast, I want to thank you once again, Jeroen, for joining us today. Our conversation was truly inspiring and insightful. We gained many valuable insights. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this episode on Agrowth. Please feel free to share this episode if you found it useful and interesting. And we'll see each other in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the WAVE podcast. We are Voices of Ecology. If you're inspired to act, share and learn, connect with us, then follow us on Instagram at WAVE Project EU and share the episode with another person today. Every bit keeps the wave moving forward.